He did not get hit. Nobody touched him. He planted his right foot, lunged for a loose ball, and the most dangerous offensive player in the Eastern Conference dropped to the floor like a building with its foundation pulled out. 298 days later, he started a game. I am Sebastian, a physical therapist and performance analyst. For the next 10 minutes, I am going to show you exactly what happened to that tendon, what it took to come back, and whether the Tatum we just watched walk back onto that court is the real Tatum or a ghost of him. Jayson Tatum grew up in St. Louis, not a Hollywood basketball city, a football town with outdoor rims and no nets. His father, Jayson Tatum, was a player-turned-coach who kept young Jayson after practice until the janitor wanted to lock up. What felt like harshness as a kid became, Tatum later said, a deep comfort with pressure. His mother, Brandy Cole, raised him largely on her own while working night jobs and eventually becoming an attorney. Excellence was expected, not just in basketball. One detail that reframes everything. Tatum became a father at 19. His son Deuce was born in 2017, before the draft, before the fame, before the $300 million. He has said it completely rewired how he saw his career. It was not about all-star games. It was about changing his family's life. Forever. Hold that thought, because during the darkest months of rehab, Deuce becomes the most important variable in this story. Like almost every kid born in '98, Tatum's basketball imagination was built on Kobe Bryant. The footwork, the shot-making, the killer instinct. He spent hours in St. Louis gyms copying Kobe's jab steps on empty courts before Bryant even knew his name. That relationship eventually shifted from distant idol to actual mentorship. Kobe's message was blunt: be legendary. Now here is where this story gets eerie. Kobe Bryant also ruptured his Achilles. April 12, 2013. After collapsing on a non-contact play, he limped to the free throw line on a torn Achilles and calmly drained both shots, then walked off under his own power. Sports psychologists called that a near-perfect example of task-focused coping, narrowing your entire world to the next action despite catastrophic pain. Tatum grew up watching that clip, over and over, and then 12 years later, in a different building, he lived it. I am leaving one question hanging until the end. Did Kobe's story inspire Tatum or warn him? In the year before Madison Square Garden, Tatum had led the Celtics to the 2024 championship. He was the program. A Supermax extension projected at over $300 million. Every planted foot now carried the knowledge that he was a nine-figure asset whose health affected everyone from teammates to the future of the franchise. Then came May 12, 2025. Game 4. A non-contact play. A lunge, and the sound. Tatum described the rupture as a gunshot, a loud internal pop that felt surreal. In another interview, he described feeling like somebody kicked him and turning around to find nobody there. That is the signature Achilles story. Players across every sport describe the exact same thing: a phantom kick, a gunshot, a broken rubber band. Let me show you what was actually happening inside that leg. The Achilles is the thickest and strongest tendon in the human body. In elite sport, it can carry forces up to 10 to 12 times your body weight. It stores elastic energy like a spring and recoils to propel you forward. An engineering marvel. But here is the design flaw. About 3/4 of all Achilles ruptures happen in a narrow zone approximately 2 to 6 centimeters above the heel, called the watershed area. It is where blood supply is relatively poor, mechanical loads are highest, and micro-damage accumulates the fastest. Evolution accepted this trade-off. Enormous energy storage, even if it means a vulnerable choke point when modern sport overloads it. The Achilles, named for a warrior with one weak spot, was first described in Anatomy in 1693 by a scientist who reportedly dissected his own amputated leg. Personal loss, scientific curiosity, and ancient myth fused into the name now dreaded in every locker room on Earth. Here's the part most people miss completely. Most Achilles ruptures do not happen to perfectly healthy tendons. Microscopic studies of so-called acute ruptures often reveal chronic degeneration underneath. Disorganized collagen, tiny tears, areas that look more like worn-out rope than fresh cord. Powerful muscles can mask an underperforming tendon right up until the moment it fails. In Tatum's case, there were no widely reported Achilles issues before May 2025. But given population data, it is unlikely his tendon went from perfect to exploded in a single play. More likely, microscopic damage accumulated quietly over years of high-minute playoff runs and national team summers. One lunge was simply one too many. Was it an accident? Or had it been announcing itself for months and nobody heard it? Recovery happens in 4 chapters. Chapter 1. The wreckage. Surgery in under 24 hours. Boot, crutches, watching the playoffs continue without him. Specialized cells lay down new collagen, initially disorganized, more like scar tissue than a healthy tendon. Tatum called the first 6 weeks the toughest of his life. Chapter 2. The grind. Resistance band work. Relearning how to walk without limping. Push too hard and you risk elongating the tendon. Stay too timid and you risk stiffness. A narrow corridor with no margin for ego. Chapter 3. Learning to trust it. Collagen fibers begin to realign along the direction of stress, but the tendon needs enough load to guide proper alignment without accumulating new damage faster than it can be repaired. Tatum called the mental side as hard as the physical. Chapter 4. Becoming Tatum again. Studies show persistent deficits in calf strength and elastic recoil even a year or more out. Kevin Durant said it took roughly 700 days before he felt like himself, even though he had been back playing NBA games for months. That is the real timeline, not the return date. What comes after? Surgery performed by Dr. Martin O'Malley, the same surgeon who rebuilt Durant. Speed mattered. Early repair brings tendon ends together before swelling creates a larger gap, protecting the push-off power Tatum's game depends on. There is a detail from the recovery documentary that is easy to miss. Not the training montages. It is quieter. Tatum, 3 months post-op, talking about his sons during the darkest stretches. How they were too young to care about player efficiency rating. They just wanted their dad present, leg brace and all. Sports psychology is consistent. Athletes who anchor their identity beyond performer are more resilient after major injuries. His fatherhood, which began before his first NBA paycheck, quietly became one of his most powerful rehabilitation tools. There is also a word I want to introduce, because it explains something MRI scans cannot. Kinesiophobia, pronounced kinesiophobia. The persistent fear of re-injury that leads athletes to protect the injured limb long after it is mechanically sound. A significant portion of athletes who are physically cleared never fully return, not because of the tendon, but because of the fear. Tatum's framing throughout rehab, one day at a time, treating the injury as an opportunity, is not media spin. It is textbook cognitive reframing. Now let me put history on trial. Exhibit A, Dominique Wilkins, 1992. The league's premier dunker, 32 years old. Achilles rupture. Fewer than 10 months later, he returned, averaged 29.9 points per game, and finished 5th in MVP voting. He called it the best all-around year of his career. He learned, in his own words, to play more on the ground, adding craft to his still formidable athleticism. The best-case scenario made real. Exhibit B, Kobe Bryant, 2013. Return fast on paper, about 8 months. What followed was a cascade, a knee fracture, a torn rotator cuff, final seasons marked by limited bursts of his old self. He was 34 at rupture, significantly older than Tatum's 27. Biomechanical studies show that after Achilles rupture, athletes often alter mechanics in both legs to offload the injured side, setting the stage for new breakdowns. Tatum idolized this man. The lesson is two-sided. Embody the mental resilience, but do not let heroics override long-term health. Exhibit C, the full spectrum. DeMarcus Cousins at 27, Tatum's exact age, returned in about a year, then suffered a torn quad, then a torn ACL. The compensatory spiral hit him with full force. Kevin Durant waited 18 months, came back as a top 5 player, but needed 700 days to feel like himself. Then in the same 2025 postseason, Damian Lillard at 34 missed the entire following season. Tyrese Halliburton at 25, same injury, same timeline. 3 players, same postseason, same injury. 3 completely different outcomes. Tatum's advantages are real and measurable. 27 at injury. Surgery in under 24 hours. The same surgeon who rebuilt Durant. 6 days a week, more than 3 hours a day of rehab. And a playing style built on patience over pure explosion. Slow probing dribbles into a sudden pull-up, craft over relentless rim attacks. That style is historically easier to preserve after an Achilles rupture. His real risks mirror the science. Subtle tendon elongation, chronic calf weakness, and most chillingly, the other Achilles. Research consistently shows that athletes with a previous rupture carry a meaningfully elevated risk of rupturing the opposite tendon. March 6, 2026. Dallas, 298 days after surgery, 15 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists. The Celtics won. The stat line is not the point. The real data was invisible. How did that tendon feel on his first hard push? Did he flinch? Did he go home without a new spike in soreness? The question was never, can he play an NBA game 10 months after rupturing his Achilles? The real question, the one no surgeon or scan can answer, is this. Is he the same Jayson Tatum? The tendon that comes back is different, thicker, potentially stiffer, less elastic. The spring rebuilt from scar tissue. Wilkins came back statistically better, but changed his game. Durant came back as a top 5 player, but with more load management and a longer arc. Neither came back exactly the same. They came back as evolved versions. And here is what makes Tatum's case compelling. 27 years old, surgery in 24 hours, a game built on skill over raw explosion, and a mind trained since childhood to treat setbacks not as doom, but as data. The science leaves room for a fairy tale. History leaves room for a fairy tale. Whether we are watching the fairy tale or the prologue to a much harder chapter that we will know in about 18 months. Now I want to hear from you. Where does Tatum end up? Option A. He ends up in the Wilkins and Durant bucket, evolves his game, becomes a top 5 player again. Option B. The compensatory injuries begin within 2 years, and we look back on March 6th as the beginning of the decline. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you think it is more complicated than A or B, tell me why. The best comment this week gets featured in the next video. If this kind of breakdown is your thing, subscribing takes 5 seconds. Because next week I am breaking down a question nobody in sports is asking loudly enough. If 2 Achilles tendons already snapped in the same postseason, how many more are coming?